let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to talk through kind of my workflow a bit and go over some examples before we even get to the website, just to kind of explain the thought process because the tool is fantastic, but I think it's bigger than that. I think if you want to use a tool properly, um, you don't want the tool to be the driver. You really want to use it as its strengths, but then still be able to distance yourself from it and think independently, and then use that tool to kind of push ideas forward. So it kind of goes back to, it's not the hammer, it's the person that's holding the hammer, the person that's swinging the hammer. So we could all open this program and start working, but we're all going to put out something differently, and it really just depends on how you use it, not necessarily your skill level. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's do this first. And I'll just do a quick introduction of myself again for those that have just joined. My name's Jake. I'm an architect by training. I started getting into NFTs about 2 years ago, and this year is really the beginning of me kind of starting to create my own art and really trying to push the boundaries of what I can do in the real world in architecture. And then people are already trolling, so that's fine. Okay, so let's get started with this first image. So these are some things that we're going to kind of dive into in more detail, but what I was really trying to convey with this slide is, for me, AI art is all about the idea. Like, what are you trying to create? And you don't always start with the idea, but I think everything should always kind of come back to it. So if we're starting with an image and we're looking at that image, that's typically how I like to start. What does this remind me of? What could this possibly be? That kind of creates an idea. The idea is then pushed forward with a prompt, and that prompt can either be a photograph or it can be words. And then those words or that photo can be enhanced. Again, you're making an enhancement to emphasize the original idea. And then we're going to go over something that's called strength, which is really powerful. And once you get a handle for this, it's really going to unlock endless possibilities for the art that you create. And then at the end, you have the output. And when I first started with the various AI software that I was using, I was getting to the output and then that was it, right? So it was like, okay, I don't really like this. Let me try again. And I would start the process over again. But the real breakthrough moment is you don't start over. You take that output and you put that as your image. And then if your image is not as refined as you want it to be, or if it's not really clear on the idea, then you give it a different prompt and you give it a different enhancement. And then you just keep going and keep going. And that loop can go as long as you want. At a certain point, you'll get to an image and you'll look at it, you'll be like, wow, I don't understand how that just happened. And that's usually when I stop. But it can take 50, 100 iterations before I get to something that I like. And I really wanted to drive that point home, because you might start with something and it may look, illegible or amorphic or vague. That's not a bad thing. I think, and we're going to talk about this a bit, but getting too detailed too quickly, I find limiting, where once you get to a certain resolution, it's hard to go beyond that. So if you keep things kind of loose, then you're able to kind of move from one idea to the next. So I'm going to first talk about this group of images here. So this is an image that Jack used as metadata. And this was kind of one of the earliest iterations that I saw that he put out. But what's really nice about this is it has subtle geometry to it. It's not very rigid. It has a little bit of materiality. And what this allows you to do is like I was saying, is like it's kind of vague what this is, but if we took this image and we use certain prompts to turn it into fish, and you went through that cycle, let's say 10 times, you can get to something that's pretty controlled and pretty clean like this. And then once you have this image, you then can take that image, which is output, and put it back as the image and say, I want jellyfish. And not only do I want jellyfish, I want glowing jellyfish. I want translucent, colorful jellyfish. And that's how I got to this image. And what's really cool about this is it's not only changing the foreground, it's changing the background. So the background will evolve over time. And the first 9 images that I'm going to talk through are all created from each other. And what that does is it creates kind of a nice set. So there's like tonal variation, but there's also kind of like a consistency that's threading them all together. So when I look at this, that's when I start thinking, like, what else could that be? And one of the first things that I thought about was, this kind of reminds me of like fabric and in the air, like blowing, right? So I start kind of thinking about like a ballerina, and the first iterations of the ballerina weren't this clear, but I just kept working it until I got to this image. And then from there, I was able to turn it into roses. When I first created the roses, they were closed. So I adjusted the prompt to be blooming roses. And you can kind of start to see it's really just this like iterative process where you're taking something and you can either stop here if you want, or you can kind of continue to push it. The roses became succulents. If I come back to the jellyfish and the fish, those became colorful birds. The colorful birds became origami. The origami became whatever this is. So that's one way of approaching it, is taking an image and just iterating it with slightly adjusting the prompts at different stages and adjusting the strength as you go. And we're going to go over this in a second, to get to kind of a series of imageries. And today I'm going to focus mostly on like 3-dimensional things, because I think those are the most interesting for me. We're going to also look at some 2D, because the 2D things are equally as beautiful, but the 3-dimensional outputs take more steps. So I kind of want to give you guys like all the tools. So if you can do 3D well, you can do 2D well. And the 2D, this could be a painting, this could be a photograph, this could, like, all of those types of prompts are easier than getting something that has depth and has shadow. Does anybody have any questions or any thoughts on these first couple of images? If not, I can keep going. All right, cool. So the next example is a flat image, and this one, this image created these two, and there's a setting in the noun site that uses the outlines of an image to create very crisp outputs very quickly. But it's either all or nothing. There's not this like iteration to get to something. It's really you type in wooden bookshelf, modern architecture, and it's going to come out with something that looks like this. And then I took these iterations and fine-tuned them, but there's not drastic changes from one to the next, because again, like, the clarity of the image is so precise that it's not, it doesn't know what it is. It knows it's a bookshelf. Some of these, this could be anything, right? So it's easier to change from one to the next. Here's another example that I wanted to share. If you do a live demo, yeah, I'm definitely doing a live demo in a few minutes. I just wanted to show a few examples of how to create, and then we're going to go into the site. So this is an idea that I had where I wanted the one check to kind of be a rock that people were canoeing to get to climb. And instead of building this model in one of the modeling programs that I use, I just use this metadata image because it already has it for me. And then I modified it because I wanted water to be in the front. So I put a fill of blue. The noun site is really smart where it understands blue is water, green is grass. So when you start to get certain tones, it's easy to change green to plant. It knows what that means. And this is kind of a good example. This image here was probably over 100 iterations. It took a long time to kind of get to that. This is an example of some things we're going to look at in just a moment, where this is what I'm starting with. This is something that I modeled and rendered myself just to show kind of what can happen if you have water already. It understands that. And then if you have reflections already, it will give you reflections, and then you can change the geometry how you want. And then the last one is another example we're going to look at, where if you keep things kind of vague, this is like a series of stacked shipping containers, then I can take this image and say, I want that to be a stack of lemons. And here's a stack of lemons in the same shape. It's a back and forth to keep the geometry. You don't want to go too far within the site. You want to kind of stay within a certain strength. We were talking about strength. Let me go back to that image. We're talking about strength here. This is really important. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to check these comments real quick. This is awesome. Thanks for sharing. Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to stop sharing this, and then we're going to start looking at. We're going to start looking at the noun site. And if you guys have any of those starter images that I sent out, feel free to plug that in. All right, can everybody see the noun site?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so when we first come to the website, this is actually, let me just refresh the page because it looks a little bit different. All right, this is what you start with, and it has the prompts, it has a negative prompt, it has quality, enhance, prompt with image, create images. I always start with edit an image for my workflow. And I'm usually selecting an image with an idea already in mind. So I'm going to select something. We're going to start with 2D graphics, and then we're going to get into the same. So to me, this is like kind of like a one-liner, and I would probably just move on to the next thing. But it is really pretty. What you could also do is take this and start giving it prompts instead of outlines, and we might get a little bit better result. So I'm going to try multiple balloons, sun setting, and let's see. And then we're gonna take a look at the strength after that. And the fact that it does 4 of these at a time is so great, because, you know, I'd say most of the time I only really like one of them. And there's sometimes I don't like any of them, and you kind of just run it again. The strength on this is pretty high. So you can see it's still not changing that much.
이거 뭐야?
So let's go back now, and let's start over again after this one.
You mess around with negative prompts.
Yeah, so negative prompts we can talk about. I find those only work when it's very clear what's in the image. And I'll pull up an example. Give me just a second. Like you can change, for example, like you can change a person into an animal, right? Or you could say like remove people. And I've found that to be successful, but if I said remove yellow, it may or may not work. I've found that it only works sometimes. So they're probably still kind of developing that feature. But it could be really powerful if, you know,
what does that even mean? Like what is the difference between a prompt and a negative prompt?
So a negative prompt would be like subtracting something. That's how I've been using it. Or like
Gotcha.
like take away the yellow, or turn the balloon into something else. Like I don't use this a lot, but when I'm layering, I'll start using it. Like if something pops up where I like a part of the image but not all of it, I'll try to target specific things and change them, like the color of the water or the color of the sky, things like that. So I'm going to come back to this image because I want to show you. So if you give it a prompt that, you know, in the world it's known to have a lot of color, like hot air balloons, it understands, oh, you probably want to use these colors in your image. But if I say modern bookshelf, wood, it's not going to give me the color, right? Because a lot of modern architecture doesn't have a lot of color. So that kind of shows you don't have to have the perfect starter to get something that's completely different, right? And then so what I would do from here is probably take this image, I like this one, and then I'm going to say, see if it'll save it. And I'm going to say bookshelf, and let's see if it adds books. If it doesn't, instead of using outlines, I'm gonna use just prompts instead of outlines, because the outlines is gonna be like very strict and very controlled, where the prompts, I look at the prompt version, and we're gonna do this in just a second, more like sculpting in a way, where like you want to make slow iterations over time. You don't really want to jump to like the final conclusion. So here you go. Like this worked really well, where you know, it kind of just like randomly is placing books. But another way to do this is we're going to come back down to edit image with prompts, and I'm going to say add colorful books on wooden bookshelf. And right now, another really important thing. So these images by definition are photorealistic. So I don't need to type in photorealistic. If I had something that was like a painting and I wanted that to look photorealistic, then you would add that to your prompt. And then we'll get into enhancing in a second. I'm going to turn this strength down because that's really high. I usually like to start like somewhere around 45. Let's see what happens. And you'll know quickly if the strength isn't high enough. So you can see it's not high enough. It only is giving me a few things, but it still understands that it's a bookshelf. So I'm bumping up the strength. And it's like starting to add things that like I didn't even ask for, right? But like maybe I like that, maybe I don't. I'm gonna keep going. And eventually, you know, it'll start to just create different geometry for you, which is what I love. Like I love when it starts surprising you with things like that. So I'm gonna make that the starter image, and now I'm gonna say prompt impressionist painting, just to show you the flexibility, right? So now it's a painting, right? And like maybe the strength is a little bit too high, right? Because like the Opepen geometry is like starting to break down. So I'm gonna come back here and I'm gonna take it back to like 45. And like that's a little bit more subtle, and maybe it still looks like a photo. The next thing I want to show you guys is, so the prompt is really important, but there's this other like magic button down here, enhance prompt, where it's gonna take what you've given it and the tone of the photo, and it's gonna add a bunch of descriptors to kind of create something a little bit more dynamic. And it's honestly like just spinning a wheel and seeing what comes out. Like more often than not, I don't use a lot of what it gives me because it's like just random. But let's take a look at what it gives me, right? So it's saying simple brushstrokes, watercolor painting, Scandinavian school. Like all this is that's just random. So let's see. And it might be picking up on like the tones of the wood, and like that's where it's getting Scandinavia from. Let's bump up the strength a bit. But you can kind of see how flexible and crazy this is, right? Like we started from a flat, colorful image, and now we have a wooden bookshelf, right? Like it's nowhere near what we started with. So let me open up another one. We're gonna start with this yellow image. That's one of the starter images again. And I'm gonna use prompts for this one to start. So I'm gonna take this out. This is something I created like in Rhinoceros and just rendered it yellow just as a color to start with. So like when I look at that, like it reminds me of like stack shipping container architecture, right? So I'm gonna type in stack shipping containers architecture. I'm not going to. Modern architecture is a really great prompt. I find that one to be really. It comes up with some really beautiful outputs, but I'm just going to try to keep it simple. And what I'm going to show you all is kind of how I would build slowly instead of like jumping to a bookshelf. I'm gonna look at these, and they're starting to look like shipping containers. You can still see the Opepen geometry, which is nice. I like the movement of this one, so I'm gonna select it and then hit edit selected image, and that's where I'm gonna start from, and I'm gonna do it again. But this time I'm gonna add stairways. I'm gonna add stairs, people, and let's see what happens. So you can start to see it added some people, it added some stairs. Like that's looking pretty cool. So I'm gonna take that one and I'm gonna edit it, and then we're gonna run it again. But this time I'm gonna enhance the prompts. And if it gives me something like wild, I'm just gonna delete out things that I don't want. So like I don't want dystopian. We can do oil on canvas, that's fine. Dramatic lighting. You'll start to see a lot of these prompts that are enhanced and they're coming in automatically. They're used over and over again. So I've even started a file where it has these lists of words. And if I know I'm going for a certain style, I'll use those list of words. So let's see. Right now it's set at 52, which is good. I've got kind of the same prompts as before, but this is probably going to start to look more like a painting. Not as much. So let's bump up the strength a bit. So even still, it's really just slow iterations. And if this is not really doing much for us, then I'll just take all this out and I'll try it again. And maybe the prompts are coming from you. Maybe it's coming from something that's generated automatically. But I find this is like kind of the best way to work when you're just slowly trying to iterate towards something that's more dynamic. I want to get one more iteration of this, and then I want to show you guys some other prompts when you have something that I've found to be like really crazy. So let's take an image like this one, and let's see what happens. I was gonna type in Tron. Like it understands what that means. You can see like this got probably too strong too quickly. Like maybe this one is holding on to like the original geometry, but it's probably a little bit too strong. So I'm going to take it back. And you can, it's starting to add like characters. I'm going to enhance the prompt. Hyper realistic. This is something I usually use in almost every prompt. Hyper realistic. Highly detailed. All of these describers are really good. Oil on canvas. So again, it's kind of looking at this and like thinking that it's a painting. So it really wants to turn it into a painting. So let's just see. I usually try not to fight, like what it's gravitating towards. Like this is pretty cool. I like that a lot. So there is just another example of like the iterative process and like the more of the sculpting. I'm gonna pull up kind of some other examples, and I know there was an ask of like turning something into something else. So let's start with a different image. And all these starter images that I'll add those to the thread so you guys can find them easily. One second.
Does anyone know the general difference between prompting with instructions versus prompting with like editing with instructions versus editing with prompts? It seems like very similar.
Yeah, I haven't had much success with editing with instructions. So if anybody has thoughts on that, I'd love to hear it.
I just don't get like the difference between the two, like conceptually. They sound very similar.
I've never gotten the edit with instructions to work at all.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
a couple times I don't even know what it's really trying to do, because usually what I do is I've taken the image, and then whatever image is like I'll upload a new image in there, and then in the edit with prompts I'll just change the fish to jellyfish or whatever. I've done versions of that, but you think that you would do that with the edit with prompts, or sorry, edit with instructions, but I basically just do it in the edit image with prompts.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
we can try both, but I'm with you, Luke. I haven't really gotten it to create something that's consistent with what the other, just using the image with prompts command. When I first, so you can see like this looks crazy, right? So what that is telling me is like it's like starting to get there, but it just needs to be a little bit stronger. So I'll wait for this one to load and then do it again. And the next one, if it's better but it's still not quite there, I'm gonna use this because it's closer to what I want. So I'm gonna use that as the start, and then I'm gonna add a few more words. So like that's a little bit better. So you can kind of see it's just kind of like slowly working the strength. If you go too quickly, you'll start to lose the Opepen, right? And it's just kind of like a balance between. So like that's pretty cool. I like that one a lot. So you can kind of see that process of changing something from one thing to the other. I wanted to use another image and just show you guys how I was able to create some of the more like complete scenes. And some of the starter images that I sent out, I put those a little bit more in perspective to give a little bit more depth. Otherwise, you're going to kind of have, you'll have kind of depth right at the Opepen, but beyond that, you don't have as much. So let's start with this one. And I'm going to type in tropical rainforest and spell it correctly. So you can like see quickly, it's like jumping. I mean, we're obviously losing the Opepen. So let's look at this compared to doing it with outlines. What's nice about the outlines is, so once we've got it to this point, there's a lot of depth in this image and there's a lot going on. So you're not gonna get something that looks as like pristine as a bookshelf. Like this starter image has some vagueness to it. So let's see what happens. But what I'm the most concerned about is kind of keeping the check, right? So like you can see like all I did was type in tropical rainforest and that's what it spit out. Like it's pretty crazy. And then if I take this now and edit selected and then enhance this, it's gonna just continue to get more and more interesting. These are some great prompts, professional photography, perfect lighting. Like, I don't know about food porn. I'm gonna take those out. But the photography prompts are usually really good. So there you go. Like it even in this one, it even added people in the water. So if I edit that one, now I'm gonna go back to Tron. Because I want something that's like neon and glowing and then if I want like further refinement from there, I would now take one of these images and I would use prompts instead of outlines, because the outlines are clear, but if I wanted this to be like a different tone or different things in the water or etc., I would change it then to prompts. I'm going to enhance this one. But I think what, like, the next step in all of this is creating, and like it's kind of a challenge for me, is like creating custom images as starters that are leaning in the direction that you want to go, so that it can get even more interesting, more complex. Because you're kind of handing the keys over to this machine, and it's putting out something that, is dreamy, and it's kind of consistent with what you want. But I think like a true artist will be able to use this technology as a part of the puzzle and not like the solution to everything. Let's take a look at what this does. And then I'm going to turn it over to you guys for like questions. And then if anybody wants to share the workflow that they've been using, I'd love to hear from other people and see kind of what the differences are. So you can kind of see how like the prompts change this dramatically, and a lot of it just has to do with kind of the references, the artists, the type of style. So I kind of got lost in these types of images for a while, and then that's when I went back to more controlled imagery, because I think it's like a balance, right? Like you can only do these types of images for so long, and then they just start to all look the same. But the ones that I am gravitating towards right now are really just taking the simple Opepen and then using it to create like crisp, clear geometry. Does anybody want to ask any questions, or does anybody want to walk through like their workflow?
I just wanted to comment on what you were kind of touching on there just briefly about kind of the artist's role in like giving it something, like starting with something that is reminiscent of what they're looking for. That's probably where I've spent the majority of my time. So like think of a good example. So I did one where it was like a bunch of grilled chicken and vegetable kebabs on a grill. So the background of the Opepen was black, and then I hand colored all the little images to be like red for tomatoes or green for green peppers, yellow for pineapple, all those different variations. And that's what I've had a lot of success with. Like starting with something that it will kind of interpret those colors to be those images. And then in the prompt, like I'll say, I'll write those things: tomatoes, green bell peppers, red bell peppers, like all those different things. So you can kind of have a more direct communication that way, where like if you're giving it green things and you're saying, green bell peppers in the prompt, it's going to assume that green block is the green bell pepper. It's pretty good at that, actually.
Exactly. Yeah. That's something that I think helps dramatically. I mean, that's exactly why I painted this blue, because I wanted that to be water. And the changing from one thing to the next too, like it understands that a yellow, if you have, let's say, like a yellow block and you want to turn it into a lemon, it understands that. So you can start to use that to your advantage. That's really cool. If you want to share anything that you've created, Luke, I'd love to see it.
Let me see. I think everybody would have to switch over to the stream. Let me just do this. Let me maybe just send you a couple images in Discord, and then you just throw them up on your screen since everybody's already watching yours.
That's fine.
Hold on. I think I have to send you a friend request. There we go. Okay. Give me 1 sec. I'll dump a couple images in there.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, here's one I did today. This like kind of fruit tower looking deal. And which one did I end up going with? Oops. Okay, there's two on their way. So that's
Cool.
kind of an example of what I'm talking about, where I hand colored them. And then
Oh, sweet.
it was really smart about, okay, well, the dark things are blackberries and the green things are grapes, and it's like remarkably good at that. I guess I shouldn't be
That's
surprised,
wild.
but
That is wild.
and then one other thing that I've done that I've had pretty good success with is, if I know an exact image that I want it to look like, I will sometimes just like put that picture like in the mask. So they're gonna look really funny, but I'll show you. Okay.
One other thing that I think is also a way to get something that like you have more control. Like I ended up photoshopping like 3 of my iterations together, just because I didn't like the way that the people in the water looked in one image, but I liked the way the people looked on the rocks in another. So I think that's another way to kind of control the AI and get more of like what you want out of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I sent you one where I use the Opepen itself as a mask, and then it kind of picked up like where the green grass was and where the brown was is like a fence. So obviously there's a lot of iterations between there. And I'll show you
That's cool.
one more that I did today.
I like the depth of field in this one. That's really cool.
Yeah, that was one where playing with, like, if you give it the aperture, so if you say like f1.8 in the prompt,
Oh, really?
it will know like the shallow depth of field. And I was actually going for the
Wow.
opposite effect here, but I ended up going with that one because I thought it kind of turned out cooler.
I didn't know you could do that. That's amazing.
Yeah, so if you go like f1.8, or if you do like different photography settings like ISO and shutter speed and all that kind of stuff.
I've been using words more. Like I didn't know you could do it to that detail. I'm not surprised after hearing it. But like if you use a prompt like wide lens, like it'll give you like a more a more sharp perspective.
Yeah. Yep. And then I just sent you one more. So this one, I kind of saw like, wait, where do I have the final result? Hold on, I might need to dig for the final result. I tweeted it today, but this was one where it works really well if the image that you're going for, that it has like a pretty close resemblance to what you're going for. So I just put a check, an orange check on top of the existing explosion, and then basically did exactly the process that you've been talking about.
Wow.
And it just kind of went like, okay, I know what everything else here is, but I understand the prompt, and I think I just did the basic, like, oh no, I had it give me the prompt, and I'm not sure if that's something that you touched on, but I had it give me the prompt.
I didn't touch on that. It hasn't been working for me. It said something about like my account not being something.
I had that issue too, so I've been using a different site. But I think I DM'd the Nouns AI guy, and he got me squared away, so I think I've got it back. But the other site I was using is replicate.com.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I'll check it out. There's some things that I've been wanting to create based on like certain sculptors and certain artists that if I was able to use that prompt tool, that would be really, really cool. So
yeah, I found that I haven't figured out how to like kind of tweak. I suppose one way you could do is like give it several different like Renaissance paintings, for example, and then copy and paste the prompts that you get from all of them, and then kind of interpret those and go, okay, which one of these like prompts that it regurgitates to me, do I want to test it with? So you could get like 30 different phrases or terms or whatever based on 3 different paintings, and then use those with your Opepen to kind of get something. But I haven't tested it to that level yet.
Nice. Cool.
I had one other question on the ones where you've kind of got like the Opepen in the middle of a like sand or something like that, like it's all kind of by
Yeah.
itself. So
Yeah.
what was the initial? Did you just like shrink down the original Opepen there into like the middle of like just smaller on the screen, and then let the AI do the rest of it, or did you kind of give it some nudges one way or the
Oh,
other?
I actually modeled it. So
Oh, okay,
that's
okay, missed that.
yeah. So it's a 3D model. And I just played around with the materials and the reflections. I was trying to just give like another perspective because up until now we've all been looking at it like straight on. Um, but I haven't created this yet, but I think it's going to be really fun. I'm going to take that figure and I'm just going to populate it in the background. Like there'll be like 100 of them, and I'm going to give them like different materials. I'll send it out as a starter, and then I feel like from there it's just going to be this like field of whatever your mind can come up with, right? It's like, yeah, if it's reflective, it'll be a reflective OPEP in something. If it's green, it'll be, a tree something. I kind of wanted to just fill it and see what happens. And then I also wanted to kind of play around with the like concept of like an Opepen tower. Like right now, it'll give you like a cool window or like the profile of a building, but I want to start playing around with it as like fenestrations on a building, and then repeating that like all the way into like a high rise, like in Manhattan, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds really interesting. Man, the possibilities and the different ways that you can kind of play with things is just unreal. And especially as the tools like continue to get better too.
Yeah, definitely. It's like right now, if you take like a flat up happen, these are some of my favorite, and they're all like so simple. But if you take one of the flat up happens and just type in modern architecture, like photorealistic, and just let it go, these are the types of images that it spits out. And then for this series, I was like strictly looking at like perforated metal, but you can tell it like what material you want it to be. And some of the ones in concrete are also like really really pretty. This one is pretty fun, where I just said like looking down at a pool from the roof, and this is what it came up with.
That's cool. Yeah, I think after seeing how nice some of yours turned out and how minimal the initial prompts are, I think I've kind of been like overfitting on
Yeah.
on a lot of my prompting, because I don't know, like I was trying to do one. When you look down at, like, have you ever flown over the middle of the country in like Nebraska, and it's just nothing but like farms, and you see like the irrigation circles.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Yeah.
I figured like, oh, the Opepen is like a perfect geometry for that. Let me try to make that. And I tried for like hours to get a good image, and I couldn't get
Uh-huh.
anything that looked decent. So I think
Yeah.
maybe
I
I
would.
just had way too many prompts in there.
Yeah. I usually start very simple, and I'm finding like stronger, better results with fewer words. The enhancements are just to like kind of add like mystical qualities. Like this image before this iteration looked like a photorealistic image, looked more like a movie set. And then I adjusted it with some enhancements and prompts to make it look, more like a painting, or more like um, I guess, like Pixar or what have you. But I definitely like to start with fewer words. I think that helps for sure. This one took a long time, and like I'm still not like, I feel like it could have been better, but like it's like it's getting the concept across, right? I think a lot of these are just to try and get a concept across. They're not meant to be like perfect, but this one took a lot of iterating to get the waves to still kind of look like Opepen, and then to get the surfers at the right scale. Um, and then I just noticed the other day, like this is like a whale or something like coming out of the water.
Dude, that's amazing.
It's pretty wild. This one, I wanted to share this one. This was kind of early on where like I knew I wanted like glowing neon lights, but if I went there too soon, it was just giving me circles, and that wasn't looking very interesting. So I started just kind of slowly iterating with prompts and like using like geometry words to kind of get some geometry in here. And then the next one was like one of those happy surprises where it just like connected everything. And that was just playing around with the strength too, like with prompts. That wasn't using the outline feature.
Yeah, that one's really cool.
And it started, so this one actually started from this image. So I started from that, which is my only 20 check. But I can't wait to see where Jack and the team takes it, because it's, and I listened to the recording of the space and he talked about it, but it's like, you don't want to, and I'm happy that he's not rushing it, because this is something that's evolving so quickly. You don't want to like freeze where we are in this moment and put out a 10,000 collection, because 2 weeks from now, what you could have done, what you did 2 weeks ago might be completely obsolete. So I think it's smart to not rush it, and I think it's smart to make it to allow it to evolve over time. I think is something that will revolutionize the way people think about PFP projects, where it's not, it's not just an animal or a cartoon graphic that you're owning, but it's like a living, like breathing thing that will evolve with you and with technology over time. I think that's something that is definitely revolutionary. It's kind of like Tesla, being able to, or the iPhone, like updating your iPhone to the latest hardware. It's the way that I think they're approaching it. It will be that way, where like your PFP can continue to evolve as technology evolves.
Yeah, I think that was the thing for me that really, like, where Opepen really landed was, I think it was like on Saturday or Sunday when he was tweeting about it and comparing checks, which is like, kind of a set it and forget it infinite process, to Opepen, which, is going to utilize a technology that's going to be constantly changing and updating. And how do you create a piece of artwork that reflects that and can also continue to change with the technology? So those two, like the yin and yang of that, I think is just so awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, does anybody else have any questions, or does anybody want to share some of the art that they've been creating? If not,
Yeah, I would like just to say thank you for this space. It helps a lot of us that they are getting into the whole AI stuff, and yeah, thank you very much for it, man. Very very good job what you guys are doing. Well, I'm not new to the space, to be honest. I am the one building an app like this, so I'm not new, but I can really see. Thank you for this, because this show me like the stuff that I should be doing on my app. and I can see all the difficulties that people have while doing the prompts and stuff like that. So thank you for the space. Really, really helpful.
That's great. That's
Mhm.
wonderful to hear, and I look forward to seeing yours and everyone else's creations. Because it doesn't help anybody, and I think Jack taught taught me this, and I'm sure other people this very early on, like really embracing CCO and not hiding your secrets. That I'm not inventing anything. I just spent a lot of time, working with it and learned a few things. And to me, the community is stronger if we all can do this, right? Like,
Exactly.
I think we're moving away from that world where like ownership is only yours and nobody can touch it and nobody can iterate it. Like I think that that's long gone, and we're moving towards like building stronger together. And if we have 100 people, 1,000 people doing this, like look out, like people are going to notice, and it's going to benefit the community as a whole. So
Yeah, I agree.
Well
So
put, man.
thank you for the space.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much. This has been really interesting and really enlightening. So I learned a lot. Appreciate it.
Yes,
Cool.
me too. Me too. I definitely took some pointers for adding to my app. So let's see. Thank you.
Nice. I look forward to seeing it. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Like I said, I'll take this clip and the previous clip and get it on YouTube so that everybody can watch it, and hopefully we can do like a follow-up space maybe in a week or two, and have more people share what they've been working on.
Sounds good.
Cool. Later, everybody.